So, spent much of my life running from myself. I just wasn't very happy with myself. So, I was searching for distractions. In 12-step meetings, we call approximate 50% of the population that is normal, basically okay with themselves and not driven to seek out distractions. We call them normies. In psychological attachment terms, people with secure attachment, they're fine with themselves. They're fine with reaching out to other people. If someone treats them poorly, they distance themselves, and they don't hang around for abusive treatment. On the other hand, they're not afraid to engage and attach with the people they like. So that's about 50% of the population. Then about 20% of the population are people who are avoidant, have avoidant attachment styles. That means people who basically don't want to attach to other people. So these are people who are raised with distant or aloof parenting, and normies were raised with consistent parenting. Parents who, well, of course not perfect, but basically cared about them and were consistent. And then about 20% of the population has anxious attachment. That's me, and that's inconsistent parenting. So I had a lot of different parental figures in my early years. Some were warm and loving, some were cold and aloof, some were consistent, some were volatile, quite a few were volatile. Quite a few of people who raised me, I just never knew where they'd be at one day from the other. So that created in me someone who was highly anxious about my attachments. A tendency to obsess over just the quality of acquaintances. Sometimes I've gotten up at 2 a.m. to see if an acquaintance has unfriended me on Facebook. Tended to obsess about my romantic partners. I've gotten into cycles where I'd write these long emails to my romantic partners, like pouring through everything going on in our relationship, and they'd write back a sentence or two. So if you've ever had a romantic partner who'd send you 30 texts a day, particularly when they were anxious, people who needed a lot of reassurance, that's someone with an anxious attachment style. And it's no fun living with an anxious attachment style, so you're very likely to want to distract yourself. You're very likely to want to find something reliable that you can attach to, as you have a hard time trusting your attachments to other people. So that's my story. One way that I ran from myself is running. I took up long distance running when I was 11 years of age, and I'd run on average about 5-6 miles a day. On Sundays I'd run 10-12 miles. I finished 5 marathons, and my parents didn't want me to do it. It's very unhealthy to strain yourself, particularly at that young age, running marathons. But when I ran long distances, the exhaustion and the exertion just took away my anxiety. I didn't have to worry about my lack of normal connection to my schoolmates. I would just go running, and I'd listen to the radio, and I became a news junkie and a sports junkie. And that was another way that I kind of ran from myself, that I distracted myself by just obsessing about sports, obsessing about the news, obsessing about my running times, obsessing about my training regimen. Then I developed knee trouble in 8th grade, and I couldn't run anymore, so then I decided to become a journalist. And in high school I spent much of my spare time becoming a journalist and getting really involved in other people's lives. So for people like me, we very much tend to get over involved with other people's problems. It's much easier for me to obsess about someone else's problems than to work on my own. And I had a therapist who said to me, like, why do you care so much about your friend's conversion to Orthodox Judaism? Like, why is this such intense importance to you? Why are we talking about this during your therapy session? It's not someone who's a romantic or sexual partner of mine. And I said, oh yeah, I guess it's because she reminds me of myself. But I've often felt the thrill of rescuing someone all came from the same kind of sick part of myself. Sports obsession through my teenage years was a way of running myself. Then developed a porn obsession. I'd buy all these porn magazines and I'd store them at various places outside my home, and I'd go visit them regularly, and I'd actually read them from cover to cover. Like Penthouse and Hustler. And so in my teens I developed a porn obsession, and when I'd lose myself in these obsessions, I was running away from myself. I guess in earlier childhood I had a religious obsession. I wanted to be a missionary, and by throwing myself in my religion I could avoid the misery of my own life and my own failures to connect normally with other people. In my 20s I started listening to Dennis Prager on the radio, and I thought, ethical monotheism is the answer. Ethical monotheism is embodied by Judaism, that's the answer. I threw myself into ethical monotheism and Judaism, and I thought by converting to this new religion and attaching to people like Dennis Prager and people in that kind of social circle, that would help me create a new and better life. And I get rid of my unwanted life, my unwanted self, by converting to this this religion of Judaism. And that didn't really work. My emotional obsessions and addictions were slightly changed perhaps in their manifestation, but they were still there, as strong as ever, even after my conversion. Another way that I dealt with my unwanted self was by overworking. I just would put in endless hours at work. I'd work 60, 70 hours a week. I'd work 40 hours a week and take 15 or 18 units at college. And that gave me a way of distracting myself from my own failures to connect normally with other people, because I was just working all the time. So I had excuses to distract me from my failures. And also I could shore up my very shaky sense of self by developing these accomplishments of putting money in the bank, getting some measure of respect, admiration, and affection at work. I was using work to try to fulfill my needs for human connection, because in the workplace people would have to interact with me. They couldn't run away from me. Because we had obligations, we had work, we had jobs. Another thing that I do is I moved a lot as a child, and whenever I moved to a place, I'd then become obsessed with all the people I'd left behind, and so I'd send them like really long letters, and would almost never get responses of equal length. I've always had this habit of romanticizing my relationships that are far away. I guess it was again an opportunity to distract myself from my real life. Then when I took up blogging, I just threw myself into blogging because I was getting some positive reinforcement, and I was craving more of that. I was getting some attention, and I was craving more of that, and I was starting to get some income, and I was getting more of that, and so I threw myself into blogging, just to like 60, 70 hours a week again, just trying to build my blogging kingdom, but never really monetizing it in a big way, never making over $45,000 a year. And I've come to reflect on all this because I was just hanging out today talking with a client, and I was just in a mellow place, and the client was in a mellow place, and I just started feeling the old familiar tugs. Okay, stability, boredom. So I just felt myself wanting to say something provocative to kind of move us out of this mellow place to a world that was more exciting. I'm a bit of a drama queen. I love excitement. I chase excitement. And so I could just feel that tug to provoke the client, which is not a good strategy. So I didn't do anything. I didn't act on it, but I just felt that tug to like twist our amiable, low-key conversation to something more intense, to create, more intensity. That's also the way I've often conducted my love life and my sex life, just like constantly seeking to up the intensity level, pursuing intensity rather than intimacy. And then I felt this tug to I want to attention seek. I'm just having this low-key, sporadic, on again, off again, amiable conversation with a client, and I felt a tug to, I want more. I want to unburden myself more. I want us to be closer. I want more intensity. I want more excitement from this. I want to turn the conversation towards me. And for much of my life, when I've been in some sort of social setting, I think probably the most dominant tug that I felt is like, how can I get more attention? Like, what could I say or do right now to get the maximum of attention? And often people would call me on it, particularly in America, where they're more psychologically sophisticated than in Australia. So when I came to America in 1977, I was 11 years old, and I entered school in 6th grade, and the other students and teachers and parents would say that I was insecure. So Australia wasn't as psychologically sophisticated, so they didn't use that label insecure. But I would often go to lectures, particularly when I got into Judaism. But even before that, when I'd go to a lecture or a class, I try to take it over. Like, I try to ask super provocative, highly intellectual questions to show how smart I was and how I was deserving of extra attention from the teacher. And say the teacher might ask me to come up to the blackboard to explain something, and I would just start going on and on and on, and they'd have to cut me off. And I had one teacher who gave me a B in a class, even though I deserved an A, because I was just so disruptive. I was always trying to provoke the teacher and present myself as the contrary voice, like trying to open the minds of everyone else up in the class. And I really loved this teacher. And it was Larry White at Sierra Community College. And when I went away to UCLA, I wrote him a letter saying how grateful I was. And he wrote back just a very short note saying, you're very verbally gifted, but you should be careful about how you use it, because people who you offend will in turn hurt you, try to hurt you. And it reminded me of how he'd given me a B in a class where I'm pretty sure I deserved an A. But because I was such a jerk, he'd had to put me in my place. I remember, like, I thought I was the star of the class with my provocative comments, and then one day I'd gone too far and he just snapped. He said, Mr. Ford, I've had more than enough of your self-aggrandizing, conceited, obnoxious attitude. He just like blew up at me in front of the class. And that's not unusual. There are all these people in my life who I just adored. I loved them. And so I try to attach to them And the way I do it was by being super provocative to try to show how smart I was and how funny I was and how intense I was and how worthy I was of their respect. Or I try to show that because they had had so much of an effect on my life, like Dennis Prager, that I could affect their life too by my brilliant and witty insights. And guess what inevitably happened in all these relationships? I blew them up with this attitude. Eventually, the other party would snap and dress me down publicly. I'd get completely humiliated. I would have blown up and destroyed our connection. I would have made myself unwanted with the people that I most wanted to connect with. I'd finally gone too far. And as someone who was insecure about myself, I was constantly trying to provoke other people to get them to tell me who I am. Am I a gifted speaker? Am I a gifted thinker? Am I a hard worker? Am I diligent? Am I well-read? Am I erudite? Am I headed for great things? And so eventually everyone close to me from whom I was seeking this attention and feedback, they would always tire of giving me this constant, my constant need for feedback, constant need for attention, constant need to be told who I am. And they would always tire of it, and they put limits on me. And I dealt very badly with people putting limits on me, putting boundaries, putting up borders against me. And I'd take this very badly, and I'd react strongly, just completely blowing up then any chance of a relationship or a connection or having a part in this community that I really wanted to belong to. So in all these attempts at distraction, all these pursuits of intensity, excitement, my inability to be happy with an amiable, low-key, stable, working relationship, the end result was always the same, that I was left isolated, angry, resentful, lonely, frustrated, despairing, and psychotherapy helped. Like, you can move from anxious attachment to secure attachment. And you can do it through psychotherapy, having a good psychotherapist who does psychodynamic therapy. You can do it through becoming a parent. A lot of people, when they become a parent, they want to give their child everything that they didn't have. You can do it through having a relationship with a securely attached person. Simply having a boss who's securely attached and treats you with respect, treats other people with respect, who still has firm boundaries and good boundaries. For an anxious person like myself, just being around someone with good boundaries and self-respect, it has a tremendously calming effect on me. My whole system just like calms down, and I'll still feel those inklings to break out of stability and to make things more exciting, but the urges won't be nearly as pressing. The urges won't be nearly as intense. Like, we're all affected by other people, and when they're calm, we're likely to become calm too. And when they're weird and emotionally and physically contorted, that's how we're likely to be too.